Your current reality is not your destiny. I want you to remember that as I talk with my friend, Masha Freydlin. But before that, I have an intro to do. So here we'll go. Hi, I'm Chris D.T. Gordon. Welcome to Scar Bearers, episode 126. I'm trying to think of a specific thing that references to 126. There really isn't anything. So let's call it the Masha number, 126. There you go. Thanks for being here with me today. I greatly appreciate it. If you can, please like, subscribe, and share these messages of hope and inspiration. I greatly appreciate it. And speaking of appreciation, I also appreciate Nate and Britton Barron for helping me on this and other episodes. If you want them to help you on your projects, reach out to them at Nate Barron. Well, folks, we are in school time. I could have said that better, but you know what? It is what it is. I just said it. School time is upon us. Students not only have academic issues, they also have social struggles, and all of those various issues weigh down on them. And sometimes they can't see all the good things around them. If I can help with the attitude of gratitude, please reach out to me at chrisdtgordon.com or chris@chrisdtgordon.com so I can start a conversation with you and we can help them develop greater gratitude, positivity, and resilience. All right, I mentioned her before, but I'm going to actually have her turn on her mic now. Masha Freydlin, how are you doing today?
Hi, Chris. It's so good to be here. And I have to say, just by prefacing this, I love having conversations with you. Your energy is always just such like a positive light. And on a Friday, especially, like this is it. This is the good stuff.
Well, thank you.
Well. I'm doing really well.
Well, I greatly appreciate that. I'm so happy you're doing well. You know, we are both educators. We're coming off of the first full week of school. So I'm a little surprised we're both not napping right now.
I mean, that's a fair point. That is a very fair point. But I will say that there's this great quote that I live by. And it's people often ask educators, we do so much, right? Like, how do you do so much? Yeah, nap time is crucial. But there's also this quote that said something along the lines of, it's not about doing too much that makes you tired. It's not doing enough of the things that inspire you. And for me, education is about people and people inspire me. So on Fridays, I'm actually like invigorated. Naps are always positive, but I love thinking back on my week and I love thinking about what the following week is going to bring and what that can look like and like what we can do better and all these possibilities that exist. And so that's something just really special to me. So I feel like energy comes with that.
Well, that's something really important to remember. And I'm going to try to do that, you know, on those times when I do feel a little tired and I'll think, well, why am I really tired? You know, I should be doing more of what I love. And I really appreciate how you said that we should reflect back on the things that were good and the things that help carry us through. And it really hits to the quote I said at the beginning of that your current reality is not your destiny. Your past is not your present, nor it is your future. And as you and I are both educators and we love our jobs and we both love helping people, we also come from very different backgrounds. And I'm very excited for you to tell your story.
So do you want me to start at the very beginning?
Well, it depends on what you consider the very beginning, you know, but go ahead and start where you want to start.
Sure. So I came to the United States when I was 7. I didn't speak any English. And
Where did you come from?
I was born in Moscow in what was then the Soviet Union, which no longer exists. And today it's more commonly known as Russia. And I went to school. I didn't speak English. It was certainly a an exhausting experience, I think, that first year of where I think a lot of people don't understand what it's like to not speak the language, just in terms of like how tired you are all the time, because you're focused on all these like bodily cues and like really trying to figure out what you have to do. And as you know, as a 7-year-old, that's not always easy. But by, I want to say, fourth grade, I had changed schools. I'd kind of like acclimated. Reading was a huge part of my growing up and my journey. And as an educator today, it's something that I still really hold close. I always think of books as a way of being able to live all of these different lives, and go on all of these adventures that maybe aren't necessarily accessible at the moment. So that's always been exciting. And then, so I grew up in New York City. In high school, I got a chance to study abroad in Spain. And then I went to college in DC, and I got to study abroad in London, and I got to work at the Globe Theater. I was a Russian lit and costume or tech theater major. And it was such a, it was a thrill, like, honestly, being able to be creative in my studies was really exciting. And then I returned to New York City, and I worked off and off Broadway for a year, and honestly, it didn't pay. When I said, like, they paid us in like lunches and Metro cards, and since my parents lived in New York, it was okay. But I was kind of like, I need a job that's gonna pay and it's consistent. And I'd always taught, I always tutored. I come from a family of educators and lawyers, basically. And so everyone was always like, yeah, you just don't want to be a teacher. And it was something I was always drawn to. And so I applied to an alternative certification program. And it really worked for me. I have this personality where like just throw me in the deep end. Throw me in the deep end and I'm going to do really well. If I have to take things very slowly, it's really hard for me to keep my focus and to stay truly engaged. And so it worked out really well for me. I did my first master's degree and I taught at the same time. And I taught for 3 years. And one of the things that I actually taught in the region where I went to school, and that was very intentional for me. And about 3 years in, I realized that I just did not feel prepared to be the kind of teacher my students needed me to be. I remember just very distinctly, like I had this fourth grader in my class and we were talking and he hadn't done his homework in like more than a week. And I constantly kept being like, hey, like what's going on? Hey, how can I help you? And he just sat there one day and was just like told me this heartbreaking story about how his dad had been incarcerated, he was being released, and he was just worried for his safety and his mom's safety and his brother's safety. And I just sat there and I'm thinking to myself, like, I'm sitting here telling him that chapter 6 is important. And it's just nowhere as important like as what's going on in his life. And so I actually went back to school. I took a sabbatical. I went to become a guidance counselor and a mental health counselor. And to this day, I say that experience saved my life. When I was 14, I was diagnosed with diabetes. And as a teen, I find that being a teenager with a chronic illness is like having 2 chronic illnesses.
I see that.
It's just not good. Like the state of, I teach middle school a lot. And so I always tell my students, I'm like, it's okay. Like your body is going through things, your mind is going through things. It's gonna be okay. And it's okay that you feel discombobulated. But when you put a chronic illness on top of that, and on top of sort of the immigrant experience and sort of this like third culture identity and all of these different pieces, it just didn't work well. And I didn't take great care of myself. And it caught up with me. And I had like developed an eating disorder, and it was not, it was interesting. I was sort of living these like 2 lives where I was doing all the things that like you check all the boxes. And like I ran a bunch of organizations, student organizations. I was very involved. I had a lot of friends. I did well in school, and I was so like deeply isolated in my own like understanding of myself, and it's sort of those like mental health things, like they weren't really on the radar. And the reason that I say going to graduate school to become a counselor saved my life is that for the first time I learned what it was like to experience a feeling rather
Okay.
than rationalize a feeling. Um,
Okay.
and that was mind blowing for me. Because I remember, like, I didn't always love school, but I was very good at school. It's just something that came easy to me. And
Mhm.
so when I was at graduate school, and this was my second my second and my third graduate degree, I remember the first like 4 months I would be in these classes, and we would, it's mental health counseling and psychology and all this, and they're talking about it's very experiential courses. They're asking us how we're feeling, and I'm telling them, and they're like, "That's not a feeling."
Like, what would you say? What's an example of what you
Um,
say?
I would say something along the lines of, well, this could make me feel this way, but I think it's okay because. And then I would give the reason behind why it would be okay. Or even if something wasn't okay, that's all right. Like the situation always had to be all right,
Mhm.
no matter what. And there was very little room to not be okay.
Okay.
Um,
I was
and
gonna say, okay.
that sort of inability to process my own feelings, because I think, and I would assume that you would agree that, like, we all have bad days.
Yep.
We all have bad days. We don't, like, a lot of people don't like to talk about bad days, but like, we have bad days. We have good days, we have bad days, and we have all the days in between. And I don't think at that point that I understood that it was okay to have bad days.
Mm.
Um, and so when
High
I
achievers are like that though.
for
High
sure.
achievers, they hold themselves to that higher standard and think that a bad day is a day lost.
Right. There was a lot of that.
Yeah.
And I always was very aware of, like, what happens inside is one thing, and then what
Mhm.
the world sees has to be to a particular standard. And I think that ultimately, being in the counseling program and going through counseling myself, it opened my eyes to, like, hey, no, that's not the human experience. Like, what you're going through is actually the human experience. Having a range of emotions, good and bad and everything in between, is the human experience. And resilience doesn't mean not having those feelings.
Mhm. Yeah. So
um
basically, watch Inside Out,
yeah,
but we don't want to skip all the other parts in movies.
right,
Yeah.
right. And so and I progressively got sicker.
Mhm.
And I always thought of, like, my illness as kind of like a side hustle or like a part-time job. I refused to let it be my identity, like who I was.
Okay.
But at the same time, in how I dealt with it, I think I made it my identity, like internally, just like not
Mhm.
to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And by the time I was in my early 30s, I went into kidney failure, I was on dialysis,
Oh
I
wow.
had multiple amputations, and I was doing this, and for me, teaching was like my saving grace.
Mhm.
I Every time I'd wake up in the hospital, I would just be like, okay, like, I just have to get back to my classroom.
Mhm.
And to me, having been that sick, it shifted the way that I see things, in terms of, I no longer look at things like I have to do this.
Mhm.
I go, I get to do this.
Yes. Yes. I am, I must say more than anyone, but I definitely resonate with that.
And when I started shifting my thinking towards that, even on my worst days, life was pretty good because I got to do things.
Mhm.
Um, and so I am, yeah, I've actually, I'll put it to you this way. If I look on paper, I've accomplished a lot. But that being said, I think about it in terms of the human piece of it,
Mhm.
right? Like, what does accomplishment look like there? And what I try to teach all my students is that, regardless of what you accomplish on paper or what you accomplish in terms of achievement of sort of these checklists, if you will,
Mhm.
just, like, know that you matter, know that you're worthwhile, and do those things.
Mhm.
Not do those things because that's what's going to make you matter.
Yeah. Yeah. Your resume does not equal your self-worth.
Yeah. And I think
Yeah.
for me, of all of the things, I think about the title of your podcast, Scar Bearers. And it's interesting to me because right now I have a very visible disability.
Mhm.
Um, my scars are not my physical scars. My scars are the emotional scars I carry, and the ones that remind me of how much it took for me to really understand my own worth. That to me is my greatest accomplishment, and sort of this path of acceptance to who we are. And I love that what you say is like our current reality is not our destiny, because I feel like we're always on a journey. Like being able to have love for yourself when I was like love for myself when I was 14, when I couldn't express that to myself, or when I was 18 or 25 or 30 or 33 or 35, and what that's going to look like when I'm 45 or 50 or 55. And at each one of those stages, just recognizing that that's a worthwhile stage. Like that's a part of the journey.
Yes.
So that's my story.
Well, I'm going to go back to a couple of things. First of all, I want to go back to when you first came to America and you didn't speak any English. I'm always fascinated about how English language learners, they grasp the English language. What was it that first helped you make that connection between what something was in Russian and what it was in English?
Books. For me, it was always books. I read it since I was a really little kid, and for me, books were just like my companions always. So like I remember very distinctly the first book I was handed in the school library when I was 7 was Paddington Bear.
Oh, okay.
And it was really hard. Like I can decode it, I just didn't understand anything. Even though like in Russia you start learning English very early, like in kindergarten they teach it, but it's taught as a foreign language. So like I knew the names of like 50 different types of animals when I came here, and like I knew the alphabet. That wasn't very like useful, but
it's something to hang on to, and it's an anchor.
Right, no, for sure. And so I was able to decode. I just didn't understand anything, and the book didn't have any pictures. But then I got, they gave me Amelia Bedelia, which I have to tell. I'm an English, I work with English language learners.
Yeah.
I always say, like, do not give children Amelia Bedelia who are learning English. Everybody thought it was hysterical, and I was like, I don't understand. Like, she's doing what she is told to do. Why is that funny?
Yeah.
Like, and I was like, I didn't understand why she was doing it, but I didn't understand why they told her to do it. And I was just like, this book makes no sense.
So is this teaching me English or psychology?
It was a little rough. But I also like my parents always read to me. And so I just remember like it was like Babysitter's Club and like Babysitter's Club, Little Sister, Nancy Drew, all of these things that my friends in school were reading, and I was reading them as well, and I could relate more to it. Like, like to me, I think like I used to read Sweet Valley Kids, and I was like, oh, like that's the American experience, and I was like, oh, that's not my experience, but like that, like this is what America is like. And even though that's not true, like I recognize it as an adult, to me, it gave me something to understand.
Yeah.
And like sort of like what it feels like to be a 7-year-old kid. And they wrote about what it feels like to be a 7-year-old kid. And so that, and then dance was something that I'd always done. And so it was a way of expressing myself that you didn't need words for. And so, I made friends, and I grew up in Queens, which is actually the most diverse like borough in the entirety of the United States. So all of my friends were from everywhere else. Like my best friend, we just celebrated our 30-year anniversary because we met on the first day of 4th grade in 1980.
Very cool.
And she's Indian. And so like I grew up around just a variety of different people and different cultures. And because that's like a very New York City, I guess, kind of like upbringing, I don't think I felt that different in that sense. Like we were just all different. So I don't know. I definitely made connections, and there were many times when you felt like the other, but I think that's an experience that's true not just for people who've immigrated here, but I think it's just true for people in general.
Yeah. I live in a town called New Ulm, where if you are Protestant, you are in the minority. And so it's the opposite of here, but it's still some situations still translate well over. I was going to ask you, were there any TV shows that you really latched onto that you really picked up some phrases or words for good or ill?
Sure. I used to watch the cartoon when we got cable. It was like a big deal. So obviously, it's Saved by the Bell.
Nice.
Watched Charles in Charge. It was like an entire lineup on, I
Yeah.
think it's like the WB at that point. And so we definitely watched that. And I remember my cousin and I, like, we were only allowed to like watch like 2 shows. So we would like optimize. We'd be like, okay, I'm going to watch this show and you can watch it with me. And then you're going to watch that show and I'll watch it with you. So this way we get double. Yeah. You know, kids.
Playing the system.
Right. No, absolutely. Oh, and then Space Ghost made a huge impression on me. And
nice.
And Johnny Quest. Oh my God. I was obsessed with it.
Oh, wow.
And then the movie came out and like, we like learned his backstory.
Mhm.
And I think to me, that was probably the earliest that I can really like specifically remember just my interest in people. Like,
Okay.
I just wanted to know people's stories. And that included cartoon characters and
Yeah.
that included people in books. I was just interested in it. And so it was just always a lot of fun.
Very cool. You know, you introduced my fan base, my audience to Space Ghost. You're the first person ever mentioned Space Ghost, and I have
good.
now not Space Ghost itself, but you ever watch the show Space Ghost Coast to Coast?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, my brother from another mother, Becky's brother John, he was a vicar in my church when I lived in Michigan, and he and I really connected through pop culture. And one of the things that really clicked for us was the song "Don't Touch Me" that Brack sings. Don't touch me. Yeah, and so every once in a while we'll sing that song, and that's really funny you mentioned that. But again, I'm just fascinated as to what people latch onto culturally when they come to the United States. And so I can definitely see you getting into Saved by the Bell and Charles in Charge.
Well, also, we used to watch Nick at Night when we got cable. It was like Bewitched and I Dream of Jeannie, and like I preferred Bewitched. And then there was like Dragnet.
Yep.
You know, there was just like stuff like that. And then my dad always showed me like old movies. And one of the things that was my favorite actually when we just moved here. So my dad and I would used to go to the flea market on Sundays and we would buy records, like just a couple of dollars worth of records. But I think at this point it's got like a gazillion of them.
Yeah.
But it was just like I grew up with really just an eclectic appreciation of music, or an appreciation of eclectic compilation of music.
Yeah.
And so it was cool. I don't know. I just consider myself really lucky, having had the privilege to be exposed to sort of all of these different spaces and like ways of that people express themselves. And honestly, like I find it kind of iconic. Like a lot of these things that I got to witness, they were like iconic in the making.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And I think that to me was really cool.
No, I really find that when you are immersed in so many different cultures and experiences, you just develop more empathy.
Yeah.
And I think that's something, I don't want to get too much on a point, but it's definitely something sorely needed.
Yeah.
In our world, see things from other people's points of view. But
I'll just tell you this. I had a professor in my leadership program that used this phrase, and now I use it a lot. And he used to say this. He goes, "I invite you to consider." And it's this idea like everyone's experience is different than somebody else's.
Mhm.
And so much of, I think, strife happens from a place of fear and not knowing.
Mhm.
And so if we can have just even that little bit of consideration that what somebody is telling us, if it's so vastly different from what we've experienced, that it doesn't mean it's not true. It just means that they've had a different experience. And having that empathy, I think, at least in education spaces, goes such a long way.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That alone is something that I'm going to really work into my vernacular with, working with someone who may not share my point of view.
Mhm.
And I'm definitely going to use it on my own end to become, a more well-rounded person. But I did want to talk also about your amputations, if you're willing to
Yeah,
share.
yeah, absolutely.
So, you said that happened, in your 30s.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I was 30. So basically I had my kidneys failed, and so I went on dialysis. And after that happened, I needed a transplant. I needed a double transplant. I needed a kidney pancreas transplant. Um, and while I was in dialysis, I kept getting infections and weren't sure why. And so I actually wound up going to Mayo Clinic,
Know
which
that place well?
yeah, I have to say, like, I've been to a lot of hospitals, a lot of medical spaces.
Mm.
I give it to Mayo Clinic. I was there for 4 days for all kinds of observations and tests and all these things. And I never had to wait more than like 5 minutes for any doctor. Any doctor who spoke to me knew exactly what I had spoken to with another doctor. Like at one point, I had like 3 doctors on a conference call while I was in the room, like discussing my case with me there. Like that was, I'd never seen that anywhere else, to be perfectly honest. And so I went there because I developed Charcot, which was a complication of diabetes. And basically what happens is that your bone at times like becomes malleable. You get lots of stress fractures. And because you have neuropathy, because of the diabetes, you won't feel it until it's too bad, like unless it gets bad. And then your bone becomes deformed, and then it can lead to amputations. And so for me, kept getting infections and then the infections were in my bones, in my legs. And so I obviously didn't want to have an amputation. I was like 32. I was like, no, like I can do this. Like I'm nothing if not stubborn and willful. So I was like, no, like I can out stubborn this. Like I will do it. Like who cares about pain? And yeah, that didn't. What I think maybe one of the biggest lessons that I learned was that no matter how much I could believe something, I can't force reality to like conform to my belief.
Yeah.
My body was like, well, that's nice that you believe that, and that's all good, but like no. And so when I went to Mayo Clinic, it was sort of a last resort. I was hoping that they could find another way for me to not have an amputation.
Mhm.
And they basically said, like, look, if you want the transplant, you have to have the amputation, because what happens when you have a transplant, you have no immune system. And so if you have any infection in your body, you'll get the transplant, but the infection will kill you. And so I wound up having the amputation of my right leg on June 17th, 2016. And it was actually the first time I took actually took a leave of absence from work for like a month. I had never done that before. I worked through the entire time.
Well,
And
that time off really cost you an arm and a leg, or at least
literally,
a leg.
I literally also, can I just say the English language is obsessed with feet. I can't even like you could have an entire like merch line of like, you just stepped in it, or like walk a mile a minute, like you're talking a mile a minute. I mean, it just so many. But,
I've never made that connection. That's so funny. I mean, it makes sense. It comes from an English language learner.
Yeah.
So
No, listen, I catch myself because I'm like, oh, I don't think that's accurate. But but basically, so I was on the transplant list, and at that point I'd been listed at Cornell, which is in New York City, for some time. And anybody who's had a transplant or has needed a transplant knows you can get listed in different regions. And it was unlikely that I was going to get a transplant at Cornell because I was getting progressively sicker, which made me an extremely risky patient. That's not everybody's cup of tea, let's put it that way. And so they had actually recommended that I see a doctor who had trained with them at University of Maryland Medical Center. And his name is Dr. Scalia. And he's sort of like at the forefront of doing these kinds of transplants and really like pushing the technology forward. And so I made an appointment, and I remember just driving down there at 3 a.m., like leaving at 3 a.m. to get there by 7 a.m. to have my appointment and do all this stuff. And they called me fairly quickly, and I went down the last day of school, so June, I guess 27th of 2017, to get the transplant. I had already had one amputation the year before, and that actually wound up being an above the knee amputation, because I guess what they saw when they went in didn't allow for them to do the below the knee amputation. And so I went there, and I was like, they were doing all the tests to have the transplant that day, and some of my tests came back odd. And so they were like, and they didn't know what it was, and they were kind of like, well, maybe it's cancer, maybe it's an infection, maybe it's nothing, but we can't operate, like we can't do a transplant right now without knowing what's going on with your body. And so they were really good to me. They kept me there for 4 days, and they did all the tests. And what they will wound up happening was that I had to have my second leg amputated because the infection had been in that leg too.
And when did that happen?
That was July of so I guess end of June, early July of 2017.
Okay.
And so, and they told me, they're like, well, maybe we can, they gave me options. They were like, look, maybe we could try to remove just a small part of it and then try to graft it, but there's no, like, we could put a rod in. They could sort of gave me all these medical options. And I asked them, I said, will I be able to walk on this? And they're like, well, there's no guarantee. So I said, amputate. I was like, I've already been through this once. Do it. I want to get on with my life. Like, this is not like, I don't want to hang out in hospitals. I don't like, it's like, there's so much in the world that you can still do. So I was like, just go. Like, and I told him, I said, if at all possible, please just save the knee. If you can save the knee on my left leg, like that's what I want. Because I'll tell you, people ask me all the time, they're like, do you miss your legs? And I was like, like, sure. But like, I miss my right knee because that's just like functioning with both knees is vastly easier than with one knee and without one.
I was going to ask, obviously there's that physical change, but to what extent, do you feel something missing more? And that's very interesting. I never would have considered that.
To me, it's a convenience thing, which is honestly very ironic because like growing up, I had these eating disorders, and I had this idea of like what I'm supposed to look like, and all of these feelings around that. And now, like, I am mentally and emotionally fine. Like I'm like, I mean, we all have bad days, obviously, but like I'm fine. I've accepted myself. I don't feel badly about myself. And I have very visibly disfigured. And like even the idea of that when I was 16 was like life ending, like this idea of it, versus now living in, I'm kind of like, okay, like I can't make them grow back, so okay. And so I had that amputation. They did save the knee. I healed pretty quickly, and then in 2018 I got my double transplant, and what was honestly was a rough road. That summer I spent most of it in the hospital. I'd had oral surgery again because I had infection in my bone. They needed to clear everything out, and I had complications from it, and so I wound up in the hospital. I don't recommend anybody go to the hospital in July in general. That's when all the interns start.
Good to know.
Yeah, no, just like in general, I'm all about teaching. You can do whatever you need to me to, help teach others. But if you have like complicated cases, like July, if you can help it, July is not the month to be in a
Maybe
hospital.
keep the first years away from that year.
Yeah, just a little bit. But I wound up actually like having a seizure because I couldn't digest some of the medicine, and I went blind.
Oh, wow. And
to me, of all of the things, that was something that I didn't know how to get past. And I remember, they'd sent like a social worker to talk to me, and she's like, how are you doing? And I said, like, I was like, not to be like punny, but I was like, I can't see my way past this. Because for me, the entire time that I'd had all these like illnesses or whatever, like I could still do things like intellectually. Like I could read books, I could write papers, I could study, I could get degrees. I have like an insane amount of degrees. become a hobby, which is interesting since I didn't really like school as a kid. But I guess it's about what you study. But
We become what we hate, I guess.
yeah, so yeah, or maybe we begin to love what we didn't love about ourselves.
There you go.
But after that experience, I regained eyesight in my left eye and not in my right. And so I'd never been weary of hospitals or doctors or anything like that. I'm perfectly fine with surgery, needles, and all that doesn't bother me, thankfully. But after that experience in the hospital, where after the surgery, they basically fractured both my scapulas and my right hip. Like it was just a terrible summer. It was in like trying to contain my seizures.
They fractured those, or you fractured those?
Well, I couldn't have fractured them. I was unconscious.
I was okay. I was like, okay,
yeah, no. Well, like they basically, I had a seizure, and they thought I could sleep, and they tried to contain it, and then they put me in a medically induced coma so that I could come out of it. When I came out of it, I was blind, and I was in extreme pain. And I got to tell you, my pain tolerance is like high, like it really is. And I was like, I can't move. And they were like, oh no, it's like in your mind. And I was like, no, it's not in my mind. I'm like, believe me when I say, I'm like, I don't do extra drugs, I don't do anything. I'm like, I'm telling you, like, I can't move.
Especially with how much you talk with your hands. They should have known that.
Listen, I'm Jewish. This happens. And so it was really bad. And it took them a week to figure out, like they basically insisted that they do x-rays, and they figured out like, oh, you have like these fractures. And I was like, well, when I came here, I didn't have fractures. And I had a brilliant physical therapist who came to see me. He saved my butt so many times. And he basically got me up again, which was great. And then, but my problem was that at that point, I wasn't full of trusting doctors. And like, I wasn't so keen on being put under. And if you're going to have a double transplant, you're going to be put under. And so I was like, oh, maybe I'll just put the transplant thing off for a little while. And I have to say, I got the call on October 18th in 2018. My dad was driving me to physical therapy from work. And I got the call, and it was the transplant coordinator. And I was like, listen, I haven't had my last MRI. I gave him like a whole bunch of like reasons why I shouldn't go. And we're kind of like, she's like, okay. We hung up the phone, and 5 minutes later, the doctor called. And he's like, these are your organs. You need to be here in 5 hours. And was like, you need to be here. And I was like, oh, okay. And so my husband drove me down, and I had the transplant the next day. And when I woke up from transplant, it was like I had all the tubes, I had all the things, I was stitched from here to there. And I remember when they finally removed the tubes, even before they removed all of them, I remember writing to my mom. My mom was sitting next to me, and I was like, I have so much energy. And I hadn't felt that much energy since I was probably about 15 or 16 years old.
Oh, wow.
So like 15 years. And even though, again, I was in a hospital bed with all of this stuff, like, and from that day on, it's just been, again, we've had good days, we've had bad days, but like as an experience, it's been really extraordinary and honestly humbling, completely humbling, because you had these incredible doctors who did this. You had this donor's family who, my gift of life was somebody's worst day.
Yeah.
There's something truly humbling about that. And on another note, it gave me another reason to really embrace life, another reason to really live and do right by people, because somebody had really done right by me.
Yeah.
And I always remind myself of that, like, especially on the bad days, when I tell myself, like, you know what, it's not always going to feel this way. And not only that, but like, you get to be here.
Yeah.
You get to be here and you get to experience this. And that, people ask a lot of times, like, why am I always smiling? And I'm like, this is why. Like, I'm not supposed to be here. So like being here, that's like, I'm lucky. I'm just a
Yeah.
really, really lucky person.
And anything else, anything better is icing.
Absolutely. And listen, and lots of icing, all the flavors and the
Yes.
sprinkles.
That should, you should make that, you know, maybe I should make that a shirt from my merch store. And you know,
Definitely. I would buy
yeah.
it.
All
I would
right,
buy
we'll
it.
work it out. But in the meantime, you know, there, people are probably wondering, maybe they're wondering a bunch of things, but probably wondering, okay, how does Chris, who lives in Minnesota, know Masha, who lives in New York City and was from Russia? How do they make that connection? And that's because, did you start the group or?
So I took over the group.
Okay.
So basically what happened, I was in 2019. So throughout this entire time of being sick, I always taught and I went to school a lot because I was honestly, again, I was really interested and I was lucky to have the opportunity to do so.
Mhm.
And in 2019, I had actually transferred schools in 2016 after I had my amputation because of my previous school was just not accessible physically for me. And so I was in a new school that was closer to my house. And I was working as an ENL teacher. And I was also just really interested in the guidance piece of things and like the human connection and what we do for kids in the classroom. And at some point that translated to working with teachers and I loved it. And I did a lot of like teacher mentorship and things like that. And so I decided to do a program in educational leadership and it was in 2019. And so we started in person and then, you know, halfway through pandemic, we shut down and I was doing all these things. I was like, I think in one summer I did like 600 hours of like externship. Like I dived deeply into my work. And one thing that I found was that I had done all these things, I felt tired and I didn't feel fulfilled and I didn't know why. And so I went online and I was just like, okay, well, we're all online now. We're doing these incredible things. It's such an opportunity to innovate, to like reach people in a different way. And on a purely selfish note, like I didn't have to explain my disability.
Yeah.
Like if I didn't tell you I was a double amputee, most people wouldn't know sitting across the screen from me. And so that was sort of this push. And so I came across this post of a coach. Her name was Monica Scandalberry, or Monica Monfrey, and we talked. And she was a teacher as well. And I was like, listen, like this is what I want to do. And so she had started this group ages ago, and she kind of moved on from it. And so I was like, oh, I'll take this group over. And I really wanted to create this like space where teachers and educators felt joy and that they looked at things optimistically. And optimism is very different than toxic positivity. And I can't stress that enough. Optimism is understanding that we have challenges. It's understanding that things get really hard sometimes, and sometimes you need to walk away. See what I mean? English language, walk away. But also recognizing that there are better, brighter things ahead. And if we work towards them, then all of those possibilities that we believe in or see are absolutely able to happen. And what I was finding online, because listen, teaching has been a profession that has been dragged through the quagmire, like left and right. And a lot of spaces feel very negative, and it's not because it's people channeling, it's people talking about their experiences. But when a lot of the people are saying the same thing, it feels like a negative space. And so I really wanted to create a group that acknowledged the challenges, but also really pushed us to find solutions for those challenges. And to recognize that teaching and education in general can't be done in isolation and that we work better together. And I think you and I actually met in the podcasting group where I was looking for educators to share their stories about, you know, what drives them, what's your why, kind of going back to that Simon Sinek work around what's your purpose, like what's your why do you do what you do. And we had we did a recording session on it. And it's in the group, and I think it was really eye-opening for me. It's been truly like a privilege speaking to so many educators and running this group. It's called the Teachers Lounge. So if you are looking for an optimistic space, please come join us. It's kind of evolved into almost like a support group of sorts, I think.
Yeah, it very much is, you know. And what I love about it is, even past the pandemic, it's still going strong. I mean, I guess the pandemic's still going, but schools are more or less back in person for the most part. And I really appreciate it because it allows me not only a place to get some inspiration and also help, but sometimes when I get, I online teaching has its own set of barrel of monkeys. And so I think about, wow, and not to say, well, at least I'm not in that person's shoes, like, but at least I get to have this experience by reaching those kids who don't feel safe in this situation, and I can make a difference in their lives, and I have that opportunity. So no, I have really appreciated the time that you have put into the Teachers Lounge, and I hope that I'm able to contribute a little bit and help someone else out as well.
No, and Chris, you absolutely do. And I'll tell you something. One of the things that I love, we're about at almost 1,900 members right now, and it's a group that's grown completely organically. We don't do drives. We don't, we just say, hey, like, if this is something that's working for you, invite your friends. But people definitely mention your posts. They definitely talk about the role that gratitude plays in their lives and in their role as educators, because in so many ways, like, educators are caretakers. We inspire, we teach, but we also take care of people in many different ways. And being able to be grateful for that was really incredible. One of the things that always struck me was from one of the original conversations you and I had. And I asked you, we're telling me about the attitude of gratitude. And I was like, this is incredible. Like, I absolutely support this. I love it. Like, I want to infuse it into all these things that we do because I just think it's so valuable. I was like, but how do I teach it? Like, because for me, being told you should be grateful and feeling grateful are two very distinctly different things.
Yeah. And
I know what it's like that, oh, well, at least I'm not something. That's not gratitude.
No.
That's like the oppression Olympics. And to me, like, I don't like that game. But what you told me was how to think about it, really like resonated with me, and I shared it with my students. And it was the example you gave with the pen, where you said, like, how can you be grateful for something very simple that could meet a need that you have right now? And I've used that example. And one of the things that I did in my classroom actually was I had the kids put all their backpacks away, and I took all the pencils away. And I said, okay, you guys can, like, from where they usually are. And I said, okay, you guys, in order to get 100 on this quiz, all you have to do is, write your heading on your paper and just write how you're feeling today. And they all went to get the paper and to get the pencil. And the pencils weren't there. And they're walking around, and they're like, and they finally, a couple of kids like found, like, I had a few pencils like all the way in the back. They found them, and I said, okay. And like, you could see their smiles light up. They're like, oh, like, I got the thing that I needed. And so we talked about gratitude at that point. And we just talking about, like, okay, you had a need right now, and that need was met. It's like, your need wasn't, oh, you needed to win $1 million, or it wasn't like, oh, you needed a new car or a new toy or a new cell phone. It's like, you needed a pencil, and you found it, and that feeling that you just had from finding it because you had to work for it. I was like, that's gratitude. And so I try to remind myself as often as I can that being mindful about being grateful is such a game changer in how we live day to day.
I am, this is rare for me. I am almost at a loss for words, because that was absolutely beautiful what you just told me about how you employed my lesson and my message into your classrooms. Thank you so much, Masha.
Thank you.
I'm greatly appreciative of that, because that's what I want. That's what I my goal is, to reach out to students, reach out to the schools, and help them realize, like I said, life is not perfect, but the more we see the positives, it can be great. And what you do with it then is up to you.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, Chris, one of the things that I love about running the Teachers Lounge is that this experience, this conversation you and I had has almost been almost 2 years ago.
Mhm.
That one conversation where, and I remember asking you specifically these two questions of like, A, how do I teach it? And B, how do I teach it in a way where I don't have to like, you know, rebuild the entire structure, create 16 new lesson plans, and then, you know, right? And I remember you giving me that example of the pen, and I just had to think about like, how do I implement that in my classroom? But I love that that idea of tag and of being able to, it's very simple.
Mhm.
It's very doable. It's very easy to integrate into what we're already doing. I don't feel like so often we have these amazing initiatives. They truly are like they're phenomenal,
Mhm.
but we're doing 12 of them at a time. And there's never time to fully integrate them into each other. They're just that's not a time frame we have in public schools.
Yeah.
And so what I love about your program, besides its impact and the message, is its accessibility.
Mhm.
It's low prep, it's done in 5 minutes, and it leaves an impact. And that part, like for me, I created a framework a while ago called Reflection in Action. It's my coaching framework that I use when I work with school leaders and when I work with educators in all fields of education, and or in all areas of education, I should say. And to me, that idea of reflecting on how we actually feel, experiencing gratitude. There's nothing like, I don't remember who said it, but it was this idea of like, when somebody makes you feel something, you're not going to forget it.
Yeah.
And so just even like taking the kids back to a time when they truly can remember that they felt grateful for something.
Mhm.
I encourage every teacher, or honestly, you don't have to be a teacher. Any person who has people in your life, take a couple of minutes, sit down, and just like have them close their eyes and just be like, can you just remember a moment when you felt truly grateful for something? It doesn't have to be at this moment, but like at any point, and then have them share it with you. The answers are so surprising.
Mhm.
And they're so gratifying to hear.
Yeah.
And I'll say this, like when people share that, I feel grateful because I feel like they're trusting me with their story, and I feel humbled and grateful for it. So like, Chris, like huge thank you to you for bringing that into my life and like for pushing my thinking. I think this is something, like I worked with lots of educators across different states around the world, actually. And invariably people talk about gratitude and the way that you've conceptualized it and the way that you've been able to make it actionable without making it excessive
Mhm.
is a huge deal.
Well, thank you so much again, Masha. Yeah, I didn't have you on for you to give me
No,
this
this is all
praise,
me.
but
I really
this is
like,
such
I'm
a
grateful.
welcome surprise. And so thank you. You know, and but we got to get going because I know you have things to do and you don't want to spend all your Friday night talking to me. But
Well, actually, Chris, listen.
Yeah.
No, listen, I think spending time with good people is something to be grateful for.
Mhm. Well, thank you. I am honored to be considered a good person. So thank you. And I feel the same about you. But you know, what is, you know, looking forward, you know, as we say, our current reality is not our destiny. What are you looking forward to in the next, you know, couple months or maybe year or so?
Um, I'm looking forward to learning more about my kids. Looking forward to learning more about myself. Um, and really just like exploring the possibilities that exist in the spaces where we are. I just applied for a doctorate. So we'll see how that goes. I don't plan on stopping teaching. I love teaching. My ultimate like goal one day, I'd love to open up a school that's based on all of these principles, on this idea of human-centered education, of really putting people at the center of what we do, and kind of going back to the basics of that. And so, yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to spend time with people I care about. I'm excited to meet new people I'm going to care about. And so, yeah, I'm excited to maybe for just the optimism that I think this year is bringing with it.
Good. I know a lot of people are coming into the school year with various levels of optimism or trepidation, but I'm so happy to hear that you have that high level of optimism, because that is what makes good teachers great. And already
Yeah.
you're a great teacher, and you can all, the sky's the limit with you.
I appreciate that. I genuinely do. I do want to say one thing that I think is really important in sort of all of the lessons that I've learned and will continue to learn. And it's this. My own expectation, or maybe just like feeling or vision of what life is going to be like because I was sick, was vastly different than the reality. And one of the things that I've sort of struggled to maybe just grappled with was this idea that when I was younger, I truly had the world like at my feet. I could do any of these things, but I didn't feel like I could. And today, when I am physically handicapped, I don't feel that way. I don't feel that way. And one of the things that I talk about a lot is I don't own disability. I don't, I genuinely think it's just a term. And various people feel very differently about that. And I certainly cannot speak for anybody but myself. But I will say this, I talk to my students about it all the time. And I always tell them they can ask any questions that they want. And I have to tell you, in the last week, I've had no less than 5 kids tell me that I am incredibly lucky because I get to drive a scooter. It's like driving a car down the hallway. I have a kiddo in kindergarten who is just like loves the idea that I don't have legs. Like he sits there and he's just like, wait, like there's nothing there. And like it's not, but like not, he's a 5-year-old. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But one of the things that and I happen to be in a pre-K through 8 setting, so I get to see these kids grow up. One of the things that I think is one of the things that I never thought I would be grateful for. And I will say this, I am not a person who is grateful for my disability. I'm not there. I'm not, but I also don't hate it. It's just a part of what life is. Yep. But I will say that I am extremely grateful for the impact it has on the kids that I work with. It teaches them not to fear. It teaches them that we all have superpowers and we all struggle with things. And it teaches them that it's okay to ask questions. And I am always very honest. I said, I'm a person you can always ask questions to. I said, not everybody is a person who wants to answer those questions, and that's okay. But learning about something versus being afraid of it is really powerful.
Yeah.
And this show is called, Scar Bearers. And I really hope that everybody who listens knows that whatever they've been through, whatever scars they carry with them, whether physical, mental, emotional, generational, they're part of who you are. They are worth so much. And owning that you matter, owning that you are valuable as you are, not as a conception that you maybe had or that like the world should see you as, but just like as who you are. I think that maybe is the greatest lesson that I've learned through this entire experience. And, you asked me like what I'm looking forward to. I'm looking forward to a life of really getting even clear on that acceptance.
Yeah. Well, that was a fantastic response. And it actually took I could use it as the answer to the question I usually ask, and I told you about before that what is something that, that you might not have been thankful for before, but now you are. And I think you answered that beautifully without even me asking. I'm not sure if that's a testament to how good of a speaker you are or how good of an interviewer I am. I don't know.
Well, how about we split it half and half?
Yeah. Well, say, why can't it be both?
Right. And not or.
Yeah, there you go. So where can people reach out to you, Masha, if they wanted to connect?
Sure. So online, you can find me at The Perceptive Teacher on IG, or you can email me at theperceptiveteacher@gmail.com, or you can visit my website at theperceptiveteacher.com. So you can also find me at the Teachers Lounge on Facebook. Or if you go to my IG profile, the link to the Facebook group is there as well. And you can obviously always reach out to Chris if you want to get in touch with me. I'm sure he'll give you my my contact. And I will say, if anybody has any questions about organ donation, or you have somebody in your family, or you yourself feel like you're in need of a transplant, and you need resources or things like that, please do reach out. I am, again, privileged enough to have had access to a lot of resources, and I'm always happy to share any information that I have. You can ask me any questions. I am happy to answer them.
Excellent. Well, thank you for mentioning that, and we'll put that in the show notes below. But now I'm going to ask you my final question. What is your favorite dinosaur?
Oh, Chris, I have to tell you, you're going to be disappointed.
Oh,
I
man.
don't like dinosaurs.
Well, you can have a favorite.
Okay,
you can have
you know
one
that
that you
little one?
dislike the least.
Yeah, okay. So do you remember the show The Dinosaurs? Like the
Yeah.
dinosaur family? Yeah, okay. I like the baby. And
Okay.
also from The Land Before Time, the Triceratops, the little one with the 3 horns. I thought she was really cute. I suck at this.
No, you're naming dinosaurs. That is the basis of the question. So
I mean, I
you're
can
rocking
name
it.
a bunch of them. Dinosaurs in space, like, never my thing.
Okay.
But
So if I
say
asked you
that-
who was your favorite Jurassic astronaut, you'd have nothing for me.
Yeah. I got nothing. And then, Chris, that's talent. That takes a lot of talent. I know a little bit about a lot of things.
Yeah. Well, my previous guest said Rex from Toy Story. So
Okay.
yeah, you're
All
good.
right. Yeah, no, I just I think I like cuddly things, and I don't think dinosaurs are cuddly.
Most of them probably not. But we still, I don't think we found all of them yet. So who knows? Maybe
That's
we'll
fair.
find like a tribble type dinosaur.
I mean, that could be cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if they create more of the cartoon version of dinosaurs that are like the Land Before Time ones, like, I
Yeah.
can definitely get behind that. Like the little, like, brontosaurus was very cute.
Littlefoot.
Like, yeah, Littlefoot. Like
Yeah.
I'm all about that. That's cool.
All right. Well, we'll have to see. We'll have to see. Well, in the meantime, Masha, what's that?
No, I just wanted to say thanks. It was been a good experience.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here with me. I greatly appreciate it. And folks, again, if you want to reach out to Masha, you can connect her at the different places in the show notes. If you want to reach out to me, you can go to chrisdtgordon.com or email me at chrisdtgordon.com. Please consider me if you want someone to talk with your students or your organization about the benefits of gratitude, because trust me, they can change a life. Please also like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. Let people know about this show, because Masha's story is so important, as are so many others. So let's share them as far and as wide as they can go. So with that, thank you so much for being here with me. Please have a great day. And remember to pass on perfection and go for greatness.